Well, of course, shortly after the incident with the snake's eye, I was scheduled to depart for Burma to take place in a military operation there, keeping the natives under control. I found myself with a month of leisure time before I was scheduled to depart for Burma. So naturally, I decided to take in some of the Congolese sights before I left. I didn't ever expect to return, of course. I'd seen my fill of the Congolese violence, and besides, by that stage it was apparent that the Belgians were coming in large numbers, and of course there's very little worse than finding yourself in a country entirely surrounded by Belgians, except for a bunch of puffs, a lot of them. So I endeavoured, however, to see the Congolese rivers one last time, and so a good friend of mine, Mr. Percival Wolseley, a lieutenant in Her Majesty's British Forces, and I decided to embark upon a sightseeing journey of the Congolese river system. Myself and Percy, Puffy Percy we called him, a gentleman of the old school, of course, but fiercely queer. Of course, myself being an Oxford man, there was a small sense of rivalry with having Puffy Percy having graduated from Cambridge. But of course, having both gone through the rigours of the private school system, we found we had much in common and got on like a native hut on fire. And he had organised a trip from one side of the Congo to the other via the local river system. Well, he asked if I wished to join him on the, and of course I obliged, and we embarked the next day. We spent the evening discussing the trip in the local mess hall, and we were drinking copious amounts of brandy brought to the Congo at large expense from England. We found ourselves drunken and throwing around money like a bunch of drunken Indians. Naturally, the next morning I woke up with somewhat of a headache, but thankfully all of the provisions had already been embarked upon the ship by a procession of native Negro slaves who were quite up to the task of carrying the heavy load onto the ship. We were not long into the journey, thick jungle on both sides, when Percy turned to me and remarked, "Now you must remember the thick jungle lined both sides of the river." When Percy turned to me and, pointing into the tree line, remarked that he had seen a remarkable pair of Congolese tits. At that point we mourned anger, and, well, naturally I wished to observe them myself, so I took out my binoculars and was trying to locate these pair of Congolese tits that Percy had seen. I looked everywhere, and all I could see were trees everywhere. "Where are these tits, Percy?" I cried, and he said, "There, look there." And he pointed in the direction that he had observed the tits. So I levelled naturally my binoculars upon the spot, and was amazed to discover that a pair of magnificent Congolese tits, the likes of which I had no idea were in existence in this in this part of the world. I was not familiar, or indeed aware, that such tits were visible or could be found in the Congo. I had not had any previous exposure to any pairs of Congolese tits, so I must admit I was rather surprised. And I must say, I have never in my long life forgotten the sight of those Congolese tits perched upon a space in the jungle. It was from there that I determined, once our trip had concluded, to document the occurrence of the tits in my diary. If you wish, I still have the diary, and I will read you an extract that I have written. July 7th. Embarked on a trip through the local river system with Percy. Desired to see the landscape once more before embarking for Burma. Observed the most magnificent pair of native tits. Spent some time studying their behaviour. Came to the conclusion that this particular pair was the equal of anything within the Empire, quite superior to any tits I have seen in the English countryside. And then here I make a note, perhaps due to the local water supply and abundance of fruit. I attempted to sketch the tits, but they disappeared soon afterwards, and after waiting for half an hour for their reappearance, we hauled the anchor and set off further down the river system. Needless to say, I kept an eye out for the rest of the journey, but I was never again to see such a magnificent pair of tits in my life.